ahead with our next talk. Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, that is CSIR, is one of the largest publicly funded research and development organization and is known for its contributions in diverse areas of science. And CSIR has various schemes and opportunities, and especially for women in this country. So today we have with us Dr. Shekhar Mande, who is Director General of the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR, and the Secretary of the Department of Scientific and Industrial Research, India, is our speaker of the day. And I would like to share the screen. So, yes, Professor Mande is structural and computational biologist, and he's an ex-director. Before this position, he was a director of National Center for Cell Science, that is NCCS Pune. He's a leading expert in DNA fingerprinting and diagnostic. He holds a Doctor of Philosophy in Molecular Biophysics from Indian Institute of Science, and he was a postdoctoral fellow at University of Groningen in the Netherlands. He also worked as a senior staff scientist at Center for DNA Fingerprinting and Diagnostics. He received Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize, one of the very, very prestigious award for science and technology in 2005. He's a fellow of all the science academies in this country, and there are many, many more awards and achievements on his credit. And I'm really thankful, Dr. Mande, for your acceptance to be here today with us for sharing your experience-based advice, and you will be delivering a talk on empowering women in science. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Shalini, so very much. It's my great pleasure to be amongst all of you. I do see a number of familiar names as I read them. Would have been lovely to meet all of you on a single platform, but we live in times such as this that all of us happen to meet on the e-platform rather than anything else. Let me see if I can share my slides. And I do hope that you're able to see my slides.
Yes,
Shalini?
we are able to see clearly.
Yes. There is a very inspiring talk, Dr. Maha, and I'm glad that you have set the stage of what I wanted to say. I'm going to actually pick up on a couple of points that you said about role models and things like that. But what I would like to start, Shalini, with is a few examples from our rich history and culture. And what I would like to highlight here is that our society has always considered women as an integral part of the mankind development. You know, I mean, that's how we have all grown up. We have always idealized our mothers. We have idealized goddesses. We have idealized figures like Jhansi Ki Rani, Savitribai Phule, and so on and so forth. So it's in our culture that we actually idealize both men and women equally, and therefore there is no reason why we should feel that we are not having sufficient contributions for women. Having said that, if you look at all platforms, the representation of women, whether be it at the teaching or businesses or in science and technology in particular, the representation of women is pathetically low. And our challenge is actually how do we increase that particular representation, and how do we actually make sure that everyone has equal opportunity in contribution to the development of mankind. Now, having said that, let me give you a couple of examples from ancient India of how we have always considered women to be a very integral part of our society. And first of my example is that of the very famous sage called Yajnavalkya. Many of you would have heard of Yajnavalkya, a sage who lived in the about 6th to 7th century BC, and has been credited for a lot of philosophical debates that happened then, and especially is credited for concepts like Advaita and things like that. And Yajnavalkya, one of his wives was Maitreyi, and his conversations with Maitreyi are very famous in the ancient Indian text, and they also find their description in things like Upanishads and so on and so forth. And one of the conversations, Maitreyi asks Yajnavalkya that, Lord, if all my possessions were to fill the entire earth, would they bring me immortality? And it's a very deep philosophical questions. And Yajnavalkya probably knew that he is going to live for the heavenly abode, and he is going to leave his wife behind. And it is at that time, actually, he describes to her the concept of Atma and self and consciousness and so on and so forth. And that's actually a very profound debate that actually happened between the conversation that happened between Yajnavalkya and Maitreyi. But on the other hand, Yajnavalkya, being a very well-known person and very well-read and very well-respected learned person, he also encountered several debates from people who used to come and challenge him. And one of the persons who challenged him very successfully, and once again, this is a part of our folklore, Indian folklore, is none other than Gargi. And Gargi used to go and ask very inquisitive questions to Yajnavalkya, right? And one of the very famous questions that Gargi asked, once again, very, very profound in Indian philosophy, is that which they say is above heaven and below the earth, which is between heaven and the earth as well, and which was, is, and shall be. Tell me, what is it, woven, war, and woof? Very, very profound question. Just to highlight the fact that both Gargi and Maitreyi challenge Yajnavalkya, and just shows how important actually our women have been in ancient Indian history, and also development of our philosophy, sciences, and all. And this is the question that eventually led to the concept of Akasha, or nothingness. Akasha was essentially nothingness. He said it is a vacuum or ether between earth, above the heaven and below the earth. And this actually is limitless. There is no limit to it, and we cannot go very far. However far we can go in Akasha, there is still more Akasha to be explored. And that actually is a very philosophical debate between Yajnavalkya and Gargi. And see how profound questions were asked by these two very famous and very revered ladies in our ancient Indian history. Let me come closer to time, and let me focus more on science and technology as we understand today. In the Indian context, the science and technology has always been connected with human mind. There's one of the profound things that the way science and technology developed in India till about 18th century was always very intricately connected with Indian mind, our mind, human mind. And unfortunately, so happened that with the rise of the colonial power here, the mind and the SNT got disconnected, and therefore, what we understand modern science today essentially concerns that what is related to the material world, while the mind and the consciousness and whatever think of other things actually are a realm of some other disciplines, which is unfortunate, but it's up to us to bring it back together and connect science and technology once again with the mind. But how did the modern science actually connect, and what were the other important contributions of many, many women who contributed to the development of Indian science and all? And what example better than that of Lilavati? Bhaskaraacharya was very famous mathematician. He wrote a number of treatises in the 12th century. He lived in a place called Patan Devi, very close to what is today's Jalgaon, or near close to Aurangabad. In Patan Devi, there is a temple, and Bhaskaraacharya actually used to be there, and that's there the texts such as Bijaganita were all written. The birth of modern algebra and some part of geometry can be traced to that of Bhaskaraacharya. It predates the school of Madhava in Indian sciences. Now, Bhaskaraacharya was also an astrologer, and he had predicted that Lilavati would not be happy as a married person. But nonetheless, what happened was she was married, and unfortunately, she lost her husband within a few months of her marriage. And then she came back home, and then she was kind of depressed. And to get her out of depression, Bhaskaracharya started narrating stories to Lilavati. And all the stories were based on things like what we call today as number theory, algebra, and so on and so forth. And he would often pose problems to Lilavati. And there's a very famous text that he eventually wrote called Lilavati. You know, and the stories that actually and the problems that he would pose were things like this. And here's a very important problem that all of us can actually put our heads on. He says, of a group of elephants, half and 1/3 of the half went into a cave. 1/6 and 1/7 of 1/6 was drinking water from a river. 1/8 and 1/9 of 1/8 were sporting in a pond full of lotuses. The lover king of the elephants was leading 3 female elephants. How many elephants were there in the flock? Imagine these kind of questions, which are based purely on algebra, were posed to Lilavati, and she eventually became the source of inspiration of Bhaskaracharya. His daughter became a source of profound inspiration to Bhaskaracharya, and he actually wrote several treatises. One of them is Lilavati, one of them is Bijaganita, and so on and so forth. And a few years ago, the Indian Academy of Sciences, Bangalore, actually brought out a very nice volume on the leading Indian women scientists through the centuries, and the title appropriately was, of course, Lilavati. So this is an example that I thought would take as what would be considered as part of our culture, part of our folklore, and part of what we think has always been there in our society. The very respect and the involvement of women in every aspect that we do in day to day, including science and technology. Unfortunately, this part was lost somehow, and it's up to us to bring it back into our culture once again. Let us look at some of the role model women in the modern science. And I talk of last about 100 years. I'm going to give 2 examples, one from the West, one from India. And the example from the West that I've chosen is that of Dame Kathleen Lonsdale. She was a very well-known crystallographer. She practiced X-ray crystallography as a profession, which I also happened to do part of my career. And Kathleen Lonsdale was, of course, famous for many different things. She was the first woman to be elected as the Fellow of the Royal Society in London. So she became one of the 2 women to be elected as a FRS, and she was among the first these 2 women who became FRS in 1945. Now, as I said, Kathleen Lonsdale is known for many of her different contributions, that to the society, but very profound contributions to crystallography. In the 1920s, just as the X-ray crystallography was developing as a field, and I thought in Institute of Chemical Technology, this would be a very apt example to give, because it's the chemistry of the earliest time. All of you know that about 1911, 1912, 1913, that was the period when people discovered that crystals act as a 3-dimensional grating to X-rays, and therefore if you put crystals in front of the X-rays, you get a diffraction pattern, beautifully diffraction pattern. And a diffraction pattern has all the information about the molecular structure of what is there in the crystals. The precise atomic arrangement of molecules, precise arrangement of atoms within the molecule exists in these crystals and the diffraction pattern. That was the discovery that was made by Loewe and his colleagues. And then the explanation was given by Bragg, father and son. And there are many people who started practicing crystallography very soon afterwards. Kathleen Lonsdale was one of the first few of those people. One of the first problems that she was actually fascinated by is that of structures of aromatic compounds. And Kathleen Lonsdale argued that although benzene cannot be crystallized, now remember we are talking of 1920s, although benzene cannot be crystallized, the alternate to closest to aromatic compounds would be hexa-substituted benzene. And she actually solved a structure of hexamethyl benzene. And she also propagated that we should solve the structure of anthracene and naphthalene. And the structure of anthracene and naphthalene was proposed none other than someone called Kedareshwar Banerjee in the Indian Association of Cultivation of Science in Calcutta. Now that's another folklore, another story, a paper in Nature in 1929, but that's for another day to talk about. But Kathleen Thomson solved this structure. She had already solved the structure of diamond and that of graphite along with Bragg's. And she argued that the structure of hexamethyl benzene would be like a diamond, something like this, where all the carbons would be in tetrahedral state, or in graphite, where the carbons would be in the same plane. And then she went on to show that instead of the diameter of the carbons being 1.42, actually it would have been much less. And the angles, the bond angles between the different bonds would be about 120, thereby suggesting that it would be a planar structure. There's one of the first evidences that aromatic compounds will have to be planar. It is much before Haeckel's rules, much before the concept of pi orbitals was suggested. As I said, it's also credited partly to Kedareshwar Banerjee, who did the structure of anthracene and naphthalene immediately thereafter. And therefore, aromatic compounds came to be known as planar compounds since then, and she was one of them. But Kathleen Lonsdale also had very strong social views, and in fact, she landed up in jail of all the places. And why? Because she was drafted for the war duty during Second World War. And she refused. She said that wars are against humanity, and therefore she has a right to refuse that, for which she was fined. And she refused to pay the fine, saying that I am philosophically opposed to the war, and therefore I am neither going to be drafted myself for a war duty, nor am I going to pay a fine. And consequently, she was sent to a jail. And look at the bravery of the woman. Such a brave woman, all of us must appreciate her bravery. In the 1930s, 1940s, early 1940s, she actually went to the jail for opposing in the war. But yet, she continued her profound contributions to crystallography even then. Closer to our home, there are many examples that we can talk about. There are many women who have made very good contributions to my own organization, CSIR. There are many of them. Aditi Pant, for example, many of you would have heard of. Some of you would have heard of Violet Bajaj. Violet Bajaj unfortunately passed away about a month ago. She passed away at the age of 103, but she was the colleague or contemporary of Kamala Sohani in IISc, one of the first few in IISc to receive PhD in science from India. Sorry. But the example that I've chosen is that of Janki Amal. Janki Amal also was associated with CSIR for a short while in our lab in Jammu. Sorry. Janki Amal was a very pioneer botanist of the country. She went overseas in the 1920s, 1930s to obtain PhD from University of Michigan. Then she was in London in John Innes Center. And then she was invited back by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru to contribute to independent India. And then she went on to become Director General of the Botanical Survey of India. But then she was also officer on special duty at the Regional Research Laboratory in Jammu, a part of CSIR lab. And we have a herbarium named after her in Jammu today. The institute has since been named as Indian Institute of Integrative Medicine. And once again, an extraordinary woman of steel, extraordinary woman who could serve as a role model for even modern day young women. What I would like to do is make certain general comments. I don't want to go too much into preaching. Many of the comments that I am going to make, you probably would have heard from many different people. So I'm going to be very brief, but rather we would spend some time on questions and answers after my talk. The first of the comment that I would like to make is that by not involving women in our society equally, we are losing 50% of the productive workforce. Imagine, is a 50% of the productive workforce is what the society is losing. And it's a huge loss to the society. We could have been so much better had women equally contributed to the development of society from all angles. And that actually is a huge embarrassment for all of us. And we must make efforts from now to make sure that contribution of women in every endeavor is 50%. They represent 50% of our society, and therefore women have every right to contribute 50% in the development of our society. In many management schools, there is an example that is given about how mothers in India balance their jobs, especially working mothers. I don't know whether it's still true in the modern generation, but at least in my generations, those of us who had working mothers, there's a terrific example. And working mothers, imagine, would get up early in the morning, prepare tiffins for their children, prepare tiffins for their husband, make sure that the children got up in time, make sure that the children got up to go to school in time, pack them up properly, see them off, see the husband off, themselves would go to work, the woman would go to work, come back, catch up with all the household chores, prepare dinner in the evening, and yet be smiling all the time. How could they do it? I'm just amazed at how could mothers do it. I couldn't imagine any of my male colleagues or the previous generation males who could have actually done with equal ease as what our mothers and my friends' mothers and all they used to do it. It's simply amazing. And there's a great lesson in this for all of us that by smiling face, people actually can do all the jobs if it is taken upon them. And women especially have a terrific ability to do this to a great extent. This ability is a God's gift to women to do all the jobs with a smiling face. And that's amazing. In terms of science and technology, there have been certain efforts taken by government, scientific departments, and so on and so forth. I would just like to advertise here my own scientific department, that is the Department of Scientific and Industrial Research, has a program called Technology Development and Utilization Program for Women, TDUPW. And I would like to encourage many of you who would like to approach this particular program. The Sujata Chaklanovais, she is now currently coordinating this program from DSIR to do this. But coming back to the first sentence, the loss of 50% of productive workforce is a great loss to the society. And for that, we must create innovative solutions. And I just have some solutions which have been highlighted here. I received it from my colleague in Niri Nagpur. She is a part of one of your organizations, what you call as OWSD, which I believe Shalini is also a part of that. Atya is a vice president of OWSD. And some of the possible interventions that we can do is we need policy changes which are required. We need some innovative policy changes. And I will come to what CSIR is doing in this respect in the next slide. Can we link gender balance to GDP? I think it's high time our economists start putting gender balance as an integral part the way GDP is calculated. Unless we do that, I don't think the nations across the world will start putting serious efforts in the involvement of women in workplaces. We must change the way we look at things. We must think beyond social and cultural problems. We must recognize that science and technology are the only key drivers of economic growth in the country. And therefore, we must link women in the workforce to S&T development. I made this point already earlier, so I don't want to go too much into it. How do we catch them young? How do we develop leadership qualities early on? How do we actually give them power to make decisions? And once again, I would like to advertise a program of my own organization, CSIR. We have HRDC, the Human Resource Development Center in Ghaziabad, and it keeps conducting programs every now and then. And one of the programs that it conducts is that to train mid-career women for leadership positions in future. And I personally take interest in this particular program, and I also go and give lectures on leadership development capabilities and how do you develop leadership to this particular group as well. So all of you are welcome to contact RK Sinha, who is the head of HRDC in Ghaziabad, and would like to enroll for this program. Your enrollment would be more than welcome. We need networking support. It's just not the Facebooks or Twitters, but just like imagine the boys' clubs where men make all the major decisions over a glass of beer. Those of you who have gone to things like Gordon conferences might recall that in Gordon conferences, many of the funding decisions, many of the papers are written, many of the papers are accepted or rejected over a glass of beer in the evenings, in the bar. After the academic sessions are over, most people head to the bars. Unfortunately, in day-to-day life, women don't have the luxury of this particular aspect. They don't have the time because they would like to spend quality time with their family after work. And therefore, we must find support for women to network in a very productive way, but not in a bar or something like this. And Shalini, I would like to urge that we must undertake a survey on what are the stumbling blocks for women coming into leadership roles. The 50% sample must be males. We can't take women's views alone. We must take views from our male colleagues as well. On today's date, in India, the representation of women is about 15%, which is a huge embarrassment. Why can't we make it 50%? And our leading organizations, I don't think we are putting enough pressure on leading organizations such as Indian Institute of Science Bangalore or any of the IITs. I happen to be part of the Indian Institute of Science Council, and I have raised this issue formally. It is minted in Indian Institute of Science Council, is that Indian Institute of Science Bangalore must make a very conscious effort in increasing the percentage of women faculty, which it has not happened. And unless we all keep talking about it, unless we bring embarrassment to our some of the best organizations because they have not paid attention to this very critical factor, I don't think our organizations would be proactive into hiring women into their faculty. Also, we would like to see more and more women into leadership positions for all this. What I would like to do before I end is just highlight a fact that we discussed in the society meeting of CSIR recently. As all of you know, CSIR is an autonomous body, is a society of which the chairman is the Honorable Prime Minister of India. And the society meeting actually takes a lot of important decisions for us. And the last time the society met in February, where the Honorable Prime Minister chaired, and there are a lot of people in our society, and we are very proud that we have a very healthy representation of women in our society. So the academic representation is given by mid-career women who come from university or national labs. And similarly, industry representation also, there are a couple of women from that side. So I'm very proud that at least in CSI society, we have tried to maintain a balance to have equal representation. But the problem that we discussed in our society formally, and it was minuted, was for women empowerment in science, we must have innovative solutions. For example, age relaxation for recruitment of women scientists must be considered. And by age relaxation, I mean to say it should not be 3 years or 5 years. I mean to say that in all our recruitments, women should not have any age consideration. We should not say that the candidate must be below the age of 35. We should not say that candidate must be below the age of 40. If it's a female candidate, we should say that there is no bar on the age. It is only then that we'll be able to recruit more women into our organizations. We must encourage women leadership in science. As I said, CSIR through HRDC has been organizing leadership development programs for senior officers from CSIR, and we would also like to welcome participation from organizations outside CSIR for women scientists to develop leadership skills. You're most welcome to join this. I have also taken action on the point that we discussed in our society, that the topic of age relaxation for recruitment of women is being referred to a committee set up, and we are looking at various recruitment issues at CSIR, and I do hope that in the coming years, we will have equal participation of women at all levels in CSIR, but not only in CSIR, collectively we can make sure that we have equal participation of women in all endeavors of human development. I would like to highlight in the last, before I part, there is a paper that appeared in Nature on 8th July, that is 3 days ago, and it says that we are passing through a very difficult time, an unprecedented time. You would have heard it a number of times, but the people who are affected most in this unprecedented time are women. And the title of the paper itself in Nature is Women Are Most Affected by Pandemics, lessons from past outbreaks. And can we not address this immediately? Is it not possible for us to address this issue immediately? Can we not actually generate a base paper very quickly? In next 10 days, Shalini, if we can actually generate a base paper on this and say that the negative way it has affected women, it is our duty to make sure that it's addressed on emergency basis. Let us all get together and let us make sure in next 10 or 15 days, we come up with a base paper and submit that to the government saying that these steps must be taken so that the negative way in which women are affected by the pandemic must be corrected. Only then we would have fulfilled our duty to the society. As I said, we are living in the extraordinary time. One of the unfortunate fallouts is that we are not able to meet in person, all of us. But I do hope that by talking in the cyberspace, I have been able to make my points and would like to meet all of you so sometime or the other in person very soon. Thank you all very much.
Wow, thank you, Professor Dr. Mande. It was so fantastic to listen to your talk, starting from the Vedic ancient times, giving an example of Bhaskaracharya and the Leelavati's book. I had an opportunity to go through that book, and it's really, really inspiring. And as you say that, you know, women, due to gender stereotype, they say that women or girls do not have ability to learn mathematics, and that is not at all true, and that has been proven, you know, during the ancient time also, and the examples of the scientists that you gave, and now also current situation also, some of the women's are proving that. So our audiences have appreciated this talk a lot, and there are many questions they would like to ask, and I pose here the first question. We say women are revered in India, but do you believe that even today gender equity or equality is still not at the level it should be?
Absolutely. Look around us. There's a lot to be done to achieve gender equality in our society. It's very embarrassing that we don't have it, and collectively, all of us must address it. It's not only women who should be talking about it, it's also men who should be talking about gender equality, and we must strive hard to get gender equality in all fields of human endeavor.
Yeah, that's really, really true, that, you know, it's a big challenge in front of all the organization, not only in India but at international level, but I think it is possible. So I pose here the next question. How to work in a team dominated by men and they make a lone women very useless?
See, I think the only way, and is not true for gender alone, is also true this question for race, is true for many other aspects, where you actually find yourself in a minority. In a group, if once you find yourself in some sort of a minority, either based on race or language or the geographical region that you come from or gender, one has to believe in oneself, right? The belief in oneself is what will carry you very far. All right, and you have to be very emphatic about your views. You should not feel ashamed to express your views if you believe in yourself and what you believe is your right. All of us have faced this at some point or the other, some sort of discrimination. When I was in the West, we have faced discrimination at so many times. When we submit our papers to some of the leading journals, don't we face discrimination? We do, because we come from organizations which probably are not very well known as some of the better business organizations. But we have to stand up on our feet and face the world with the conviction that we are as good as anyone else. And if you have that conviction in yourself, even if you have placed in a committee which is gender imbalanced, and even if there are other dominating male colleagues, I'm pretty sure you will do well on this aspect.
Wow, thank you, Dr. Mande. What a great words of motivation and inspiration. And I think for the past 3 days, almost, you know, we have been listening for these encouraging and inspiring words again and again. And I think because we face a lot of challenges, hurdles, and listening to such inspiring words really helps. So I take ahead another question. What, according to you, could be the reason for only 15% women leaders in scientific institutions?
What is the reason for?
Having a very less percentage, that is 15% women leaders in scientific institutions.
I think we have not been sensitive in the recruitment processes. To give an example, uh, many of our scientific institutions have age bars at every level. Many scientific institutions would say that if a person is more than, say, age of 35, okay, I don't have to name the institutions here, but all of you know different institutions would know this is true, that at age of 35 is the age bar. Now, for whatever reason, many times the situation is such that women actually cross that particular age. I don't. We don't have to go into the reasons, but there are situations in which that age is crossed, and automatically they become invalid to apply for jobs because simply the age has gone up. Now, this actually is a very, very unfortunate situation, and we must correct it. And the solution that I have proposed is that there should be no age bar for women at any level of recruitment. Not only giving relaxation of 5 years, there should be no age bar whatsoever for recruitment of women at any level. And I do hope that I will be able to force my view in CSI society. And I do hope that during my tenure, we'll be able to bring it in CSI, this particular amendment.
Wow, that's a very, very nice. And having a no age bar is really, really very good initiative, and I'm sure it will benefit women especially immensely. There is another question from Farha, and she's asking, what are the options in CSIR who is having break due to marriage, childbirth, for women who having break due to marriage?
So, in a sense, actually, what the government does for women in service, government actually does look at it very sympathetically, and therefore, government has a provision to give what is called as a child care leave, which is being availed by many of my colleagues across CSIR. And till the child becomes at the age of 18, the child care leave can be availed. You also get maternity leave for a particular period of time immediately after childbirth. And therefore, these are some of the enabling mechanisms that have been given to promote women, at least in the government organizations. And I do hope they're actually followed in letter and spirit across the organizations.
Yeah, wow. We have a comment from Dr. Andrea. She says that normally young in sciences means up to 40 years old, but for many women after having children, this is the time when they start picking up and blooming in their career, and then they are out of competition because they are not young anymore, and that's really true. I have another question to pose, and it is from a student, and she's saying that generally in the institutions, research institutions, there are supervisors who will not prefer the women, and in that also, if the woman is married, then unmarried girls are preferred over the married. So how
I
to
think
handle?
I think it's a shame on those people who refuse to take girl students because they are married. Absolute shame. If somebody says that, please bring it to my attention. If somebody in CSR has done that, I will take that person to a task. But what personally what I have done, I have had a fortune of having large number of girl students, some of whom also were married, some of whom were married during the PhD time. And because I do work on computational biology, my field is slightly more easier to handle such situations. So at least one example that I can quote, that one of my girl students, she married in the first year of her PhD, which all of us were very, very happy for her because she was getting married and she was starting a family. And but then her husband lived somewhere else. Her husband lived in Delhi, and my lab then was in Hyderabad. And then of course it became very difficult for her, and actually became difficult for me to see that she would work in my lab for next few years, staying away from her husband. So we tried actively to get her husband to Hyderabad. Somehow that was not happening. So then I contacted a friend of mine, a colleague of mine in Delhi, and I contacted the director of his lab, to see whether she can work in his lab and I can be a proxy guide to her. So she can continue to work in my lab, but she would actually work in my friend's lab, and this actually happened. For the following 2 years or 3 years, she actually worked in my friend's lab in Delhi. Thankfully, the director of the institute was very cooperative. Thankfully, my friend was very cooperative, and eventually she was able to publish. She was able to finish her thesis. She got a PhD, and she's doing pretty well now. I'm very proud of this kind of things that actually can happen. Unfortunately, the same thing probably cannot happen in experimental sciences, but there are solutions to those problems as well. And we must actually think of what kind of enabling solutions we can do.
Yeah, very true. We have audiences from different continents. We have with us Bertha Garcia, who is the Vice President of OWSD, and she liked your presentation a lot, and she's thanking you a lot for taking a lot of initiative in favor of women scientists in India. Another audience, Sonali Sen Gupta, is asking, do you think that women think differently from men and can contribute to diversity in scientific thinking because of different genetic makeup and socialization?
Absolutely not. If anyone has ever said that, I would call it utter nonsense. Both men and women are absolutely equal. There is no difference in the ability of thinking of whichever kind that you may think of. In all respects, both men and women are absolutely equal. I don't think if anyone ever tries to argue that either woman or a race or a language or a socioeconomic background of a person, people are different, I would not agree to that particular view at all. All of us are equally capable of all our abilities.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. There is one more question from the audience, and generally we see that men, when they get higher opportunities, higher position opportunities, they are ready to shift to the different place. But if you look at the women, they are not ready to change their jobs or positions because of the family. And for that matter, do you have any comment or advice what a woman should do when she has a higher opportunities than her present work place?
Well, I think men have to learn from women this particular aspect. I'm very sad that my main colleagues don't learn this from other women who have sacrificed this. I'll give you my own example, right? I mean, my own personal example. I was in Chandigarh. My first job was in Chandigarh Institute of Microbial Technology. And despite our best efforts, my wife was very keen on working, and she's as capable as I am in science. And for some reason, she was not able to find a job there. At some point of time, she found a job in Hyderabad. Now our family would be divided between Chandigarh and Hyderabad. And she decided to move to Hyderabad. It is at that time I decided that I was going to resign from Institute of Microbial Technology in Chandigarh, which I actually did. I resigned from there. I moved to Hyderabad. Thankfully, there was another institute who gave me a job. Otherwise, I would have been a jobless person by then. So I did get
Wow.
a job in Center for DNA Fingerprinting and Diagnostics, and I did make my career there. But there was a conscious decision that if she found a job, I would move with her to that place. And I would like to tell my male colleagues that please do learn from women who sacrifice for their husbands. Men have equal responsibility to sacrifice for their wives, and they must make conscious efforts in doing that.
But that's a very sad truth that there are very few men like you who are ready to sacrifice. But as always, women have to sacrifice. They leave their jobs and they go along with their husbands. So there is one more audience. Professor Padma Devarajan would like to pose a direct question to you.
Yes, good evening, Professor Mande. After hearing you and seeing how gender sensitized you are, and particularly your last example about leaving your job and going with your wife, what I was wondering is, now you are saying this in a forum where I think 90% are ladies, but this, what you are presenting, is ideally presented where there are more men. So particularly with your position as DG CSIR, I was wondering whether it's possible to hold a seminar or a webinar on gender sensitization, how men should contribute, and have that kind of a seminar which you could lead and get men to participate. That is very important, because all these gender equality, gender sensitization, I'm saying women empowerment, everything is a women-centric, women-centered with a 5%, 10% male, presence. Even here today, I think on this, there are only 3 men. The rest are all ladies. So what I would like is really ask you whether you could take this forward, because this is a very burning issue. And people at your level, particularly after hearing you, I thought I should pose it directly and not just send it through the chat. Because ICT, to be frank, does not have this kind of parity. We have no differentiation between ladies and men. It is your capability that decides where you are, where you go, and other things. At least I am with ICT for the past 30 plus years, and I have never seen this gender bias. You do see bias, but not gender bias. And bias is part of human nature. So we cannot avoid that. But gender bias, no. Fortunately, my family, even during the COVID period, I think I'm getting so much support. So I don't come in that nature, where women have suffered more than men. I am lucky. But few of us are lucky like that. So maybe your wife is lucky.
I'm so glad that you raised this point.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy to hear about ICT. I think it's a great tribute to the leadership of ICT, starting from Professor M.M. Sharma, Professor J.B. Joshi, Professor Pandit. All of them have been actually great human beings. And it's a tribute to all of them and all of you that there is no gender imbalance in ICT. Your suggestion?
I'm Professor Padma Devarajan from Pharma.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's a tribute to all of you.
Head of Pharma.
A tribute to all of you. Your suggestion on CSIR holding this seminar is well taken. It will be done. Shalini, I don't know whether you know Atya Kaple.
Yes, I know her very well.
So I'm tagging Atya right now that she should get in touch with you. And in next 10 days, we'll hold a meeting like this. I would like to see that the participation in such a seminar is 50-50. I would be
yes, 50-50.
I would be very unhappy if the participation is balanced in terms of only women. I would like to see 50-50 participation in that, and then only we can actually have some kind of a meaningful dialogue amongst all of us. So Shalini, you can expect a call from Atya very soon.
Yes.
And you talk to her, or otherwise you call her. I'm going to tag her in next about half an hour. So you talk to her and then figure out when we can actually hold this kind of a conference.
And if I may suggest one more thing, in this we should have invitees who are decision makers at the top level, both women and men.
Yeah.
Also, as invitees, so that we are sure of their presence.
Yes.
Because otherwise the whole thing just gets diluted.
Yeah. So both of you work with Atya and come up with a draft program, and we'll organize a webinar on this together, all of us. Yeah. Shalini, we have to leave now. It's already 6 o'clock. I have overshot.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
It was very, very wonderful talk. Really, really, we all benefited immensely. Thank you, Dr. Mande, for accepting our invitation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.